Hey everyone, this is G's Garage, and right now I'm working on a '08 Mini Cooper, and I believe it's an N14 engine, and so I wanted to do a video to help people figure out the timing on there. We'll do the timing and the actual installation of the chain, because a lot of times when you get these vehicles like this, they're the chain, there's really not much left of the chain guides, and it's kind of confusing to figure out how to put it all together. And in case you're wondering, this engine is out of the car, so it's on a stand, so you don't really need to take out the engine to do a timing chain replacement in one of these vehicles. This was a kind of a failed project that I picked up cheap, and the guy who was working on it tore it apart and just kind of gave up on it. So what he did is he pulled the engine out, and essentially there's really nothing to go off of. So that's what I'm trying to do is help people figure out if you've got something where, you know, maybe you didn't know what you were doing and you decided to tear into one of these engines, and then now you're like, well, how can I get it back together again? Well, this is going to show you how, and it's going to show you in detail how to do the timing chain. Actually put it in there. Now this is going to be a lot easier because it's out of the car, so you know you're going to have access to all the stuff in front here like that. You know, obviously this can be done in a car, but it's going to be a lot more challenging. So the first thing you want to do, if you've got absolutely nothing to go off of, is you want to have the tool. You got to have the tool. If you don't have this, then you're pretty much not going to get very far. So before you put the tool on here, we'll go down here to the bell housing, and you can see there, it's just a little pin that goes through the back of the bell housing of the motor. I guess you call it the block, and it goes through right back in here. Or actually, it's right right there. So you got your flex plate on. If you took that off, you know, put it back on. Make sure you put your tone ring for the crank sensor on first. Put your flex plate back on if you've taken it off, and line up your pin. Now some of these kits, depends on where you get them. If you get one of the cheaper kits, sometimes you may have to sand this plug a little bit because it seems like the fit's kind of tight at first. So if you probably need to sand it a few times to get it to fit in there like it should, stop it. So at that point your crank is in the right position, and then you're going to go ahead and install these on here. And you can see there's one way to do it, and if you feel around these cams here, there's like a square shape, and then the top, you can see the top there is flat. Now if you look on the bottom or feel on the bottom when the cam is maybe in a different position, it feels round like a cam lobe. That's not what you want. You want to have the flat side facing up, and then the flat side obviously on either side fit into this tool here. So you can do it one at a time. I usually do this one first because this one goes on top of it, and there's a it's kind of tight here. There's your hex, so you can take a wrench on there. I want to say it's a 27 millimeter wrench on there, and if you have one, great. If you don't, what I did is just took a crescent wrench and kind of got it. You can kind of get them about where they need to be before the valve starts pushing them back, and then you can take this tool and put it on there. One thing I would mention, just to make sure everything is as good as it can be, this tool here has a tendency, like when you tighten this bolt, to kind of move up a little bit, and it's probably not going to hurt anything, but just make sure that it's pressed all the way down, and then then that way you can make sure that everything is in the position it should be. And then the other thing you'll notice is, or I'll point out, is the writing. There's writing there on the exhaust cam, and then there's writing on the intake cam. So those should be pointing up. So if those are pointing up, and you've got your tool and tool locking the cam in place, and then you've got this centered on your top of your cylinder head here, you're pretty much ready to go. The engine essentially at this point is timed, and now it's just a matter of putting the chain back on. Now, of course, if you're doing this, you know, and you're, you know, it's usually this guide here, this little the guide that goes here on these, that mounts on these 2 bolts. This is usually what fails, or I think the tensioner gets kind of weak, and then this gets loose, and then it'll, you know, essentially, if you're lucky, it'll just start flapping, making noise. I think the story behind this engine is it basically just quit. So essentially it was bound up. So you're gonna have to go in there and clean all this stuff, all the different, you know, shards of plastic out of there. Yeah, so if you're doing this just as a routine change, or you've got the, you know, the flapping sound, then obviously you're going to want to lock this in position before you even decide to tear into it, especially before you take the sprockets off, because at that point, then your valve spring tension is going to take over, and then the engine's going to be you know, out of whack. And then, I mean, as far as like you know, you really don't want to rotate the engine when if these sprockets were off, because like this engine was pretty much just like this when I got it, and you know, so you really don't want to rotate it like that. But you know, if you're rotating it and you don't have the sprockets on, these camshafts actually settle in a position where none of the valves are open. So you should be okay if you want to rotate the motor to see, because this motor, I didn't know if it was stuck or what was wrong with it. So I rotated it, and I thought, well, I don't have any cam timing, so did I damage any valves? And you know, probably not. And the reason is because, you know, for a valve that sticks out maybe, I don't know, less than 1/4 of an inch, you'd really have to crank on it with a breaker bar to do any damage to your pistons, anything like that. So as long as you haven't forced anything, and you know, you feel pretty good about it, then you should be fine. So we'll go ahead and we'll move over here. This is obviously the guides and the chain, and this little piece here has a little, you can kind of see there's kind of a lip right there, and then right there. So, and then this here has little tabs, one right there and there, and then on the bottom one you can see kind of one there, and you can barely see that one right there. So those will fit, they'll go on this way, and then when you turn it, these tabs should fit under this little groove here. So that way it keeps it together. So I'm going to go ahead, and it takes 2 hands to do this. So I'm going to go ahead and pause it and put this together, but that's how it goes together. Okay, so it actually is going to be like almost like a 90-degree angle, and then you should just be able to turn it like so. And if it's on there correctly, it's not going to bind. Okay, there we go. Okay, so now the tabs are underneath the little lip on there. So this thing is essentially locked together. So we'll keep going. Okay, so I just put the sprocket and the chain in there. So the top of the sprocket is going to ride, the teeth are going to ride in this little groove here, and then of course this is going to just spin in there like that. So really you can just pick it up like this, and then make sure you have your 3 plugs out, or the pins. You got one there, and then the two right there. So you're just gonna just drop it down in the motor just like that. And like I said, make sure when you have a failure like this, you're gonna have little pieces everywhere. So just make sure you do a good job cleaning it like you should. So right there you can put your pins in the bottom, and then that one I need to move it over a little bit, but the bottom ones are in, and then right there you see the sprocket rests like that. So I'm going to get a pin. And sometimes these are a little tricky to get the thread started, and you don't want that to happen. The chain falls back in there, but that's easy problem to fix. That's the wrong one. Okay, so the other one wasn't obviously threaded in. And that one is. And actually, you know what, the top one, I looked at it, now that I look at it, it's kind of hard to tell, but you can see the side on it. So okay, so our pins are in pretty much. I'll give them a final tightening, but now just leave them in hand tight for now. So let me fish that chain out and I'll be right back. Okay, so just get a magnetic tool. Fish it out of there. Should be a piece of cake. So it looks pretty straight in there, so okay, so that's enough to weight it down. Okay, so there's the bottom, and then we just put this crank in there. It's not keyed or anything, so it's just gonna fit in there like this. Okay, so this was actually a little bit tricky. I kind of sanded down the sprocket. The new one didn't fit kind of tight on there, so we'll pull the chain back. So kind of hard to tell right there, but it feels pretty good. And of course we'll rotate it a little bit to see if it fits in there okay. Okay, so pulled this chain just to make sure everything looked good. So I just pull it like that, and I can't get the camera down there, but you can see the sprocket is turning, or I can feel that it's turning, and just pull it freely like that. So if you weren't sure that you got the crank sprocket in, just right. Like I said, if it binds up, if the new sprocket doesn't fit on there the best, then that's the way you just test it. Just kind of turn it smoothly like that. And then another thing that I was always curious about are these little these oil holes on the ends of the cam, because you can see there's an oil galley that forces oil in there. And so then the question is, you know, do you need to have the do you need to have these in a special position, because you can see this has got 4 holes in it as well. And the short answer is no, you don't need them in there. And it's because this little lip on the inside here is going to fit on the inside of these holes. So any oil that's forced through there is going to basically, let's see, it's going to, you know, since it's on the outside of this little groove here, it's going to get forced through these holes, because essentially this is, I guess they call this a phaser. There's a spring in there. So when the variable valve timing is activated, the cam turns inside of there, but the sprocket doesn't turn. So the quick answer is no. You don't need to worry about that, in case anybody was wondering. Okay, so I put on the exhaust sprocket and essentially just feed it on the chain and slide it in the groove on the camshaft, and then put the bolt in, and then so it's still going to be loose. So you know, so I can turn the chain like this to make sure everything. So once we've got the intake 1 put on and put the tensioner back in, we'll tighten these bolts, and then the thing is, it should be finished. So we'll finish. I'll put the intake 1 on here. Okay, so here's the intake, and then it's on the chain, and then we'll line it up, kind of feel around here. There we go. Okay, so that feels pretty good. That will hold. Get our bolt. Put it in there. Now if you want, you can use the, now you can put in the dummy tensioner, which is this little thing right there. You can put it in if you want. You don't really have to. If you're ready to, you know, put everything together. So I'm just going to put it in here just for the heck of it. And then it just screws in. About as far as it'll go, and then tighten the bolt on there. So it puts puts obviously tension on the chain. But now you still should be able to turn this freely like this, and just to make sure, you know, you don't have anything binding, anything rubbing. If it doesn't feel right, if it's binding, then go back and you know, take a look at everything. But really, you know what? If you're ready to put this back together, I mean, if you're ready to, you know, finish it, take your tool off, then go ahead, put your tensioner in, tighten it down. And I do apologize, I don't have any specs on the torque on these kind of things, so I apologize for that. But you put your tensioner in like it should, you know, tighten it down, you know, don't over tighten it, but you know, put it in snugly, And then at that point, you're going to tighten these two bolts, preferably to spec, but I would guess if you tighten them down to probably 60 to 70 foot-pounds, it's probably fairly close to what they are. They may be even a little bit more. But at that point, your engine's timed, and put your crank bolt back in, tighten that, because do this tightening while you still have everything locked down. You've got the flywheel locked down. So once these sprocket nuts or sprocket bolts are tight, you can go ahead, take off your tool here, and you're pretty much ready to continue on putting everything back together. Now, obviously, this engine's going to have to go back in the car, so I've got got a little bit of work left ahead of me. But if you're just changing this timing chain in the car, then essentially at this point you're pretty much finished, and it's just a matter of buttoning up everything, getting everything else. Put your valve cover back on. Whatever else you took off, if you took off any accessories or whatever, make sure these bolts here, these guide pins are tightened. One right there. So anyway, I hope this helps you. I hope this gives you a little bit more detail on how to do the timing on one of these engines. So leave your comments and questions, and we'll see you next time.